Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the Black Psychologist Podcast, also known as the eighth wonder of the world. We're back like we never left. Thanks for listening wherever you get your podcast and watching us on YouTube. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Give us 5 stars. Anything less than 5 stars is uncivilized. I am one half of your humble and gracious host, Dr. Kyle Osborne. He is I, and I am him. And of course, you all know that I'm never flying this aircraft by myself. I have the one, the only, the greatest to ever do it, Dr. Jason Coleman. What's going on, good brother?
No, that's a strong introduction, man. I appreciate it. What's good with you though, bro?
I can't call it, man. You know, we need the dog days of summer, man.
Yeah,
It's hot out
man.
here. It's hot.
I know, man. We was just talking about it. The Yankees is losing. It's 99 degrees outside. My AC is malfunctioning, but what else? What else is new? So chilling
Yeah,
though,
yeah.
man. What's been going on your side?
Nothing, man. Yeah, the Phils are in a little bit of a slump also. So this is why we are gonna pivot right to the Olympics, and training camp is opening up. So we're
Yeah,
just gonna
man.
give baseball a little bit of a rest, and we're gonna go on to that gridiron and the Olympics to see what's going on with the USA teams.
I mean, listen, we probably like 5 or 6 weeks away from the Hall of Fame game, if that. Right? I'm looking at the date. Isn't that usually
Yeah,
early August?
yeah, it's like early August. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, we
so
about yeah,
maybe
about 2 or 3 weeks.
2 3 weeks. So
Yeah.
that's always good.
Yeah, I'm gonna take that. Give us something else to watch, some entertainment.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, that's I'm taking it slow motion, good brother.
Election season, man. Election season.
Yeah, yeah, man. I guess we should kind of get to it. It, it's hard to maneuver around the election, it's here, and it's been, Jay, I don't know. This has been like unprecedented times, man. Like I've never seen anything like this. Like this is political theater at its finest. This seems like this is something out of a TV show, out of like House of Cards or 24 or something. I don't know.
Well, I mean, listen, I went in somewhere yesterday to get a slice of pizza. People were sitting down, just walking to the counter. You hear people talking about, the election. I went out to dinner with some of my homeboys on, I believe it was Monday night. Um, you walk all through the restaurant, you hear people giving their opinions on what's going on. The one common theme I can kind of say, regardless of what side you're on, is that like people have highly like polarized like opinions, and um, you know, they're tied to those opinions. There's strong emotional ties to those opinions, right? And you see
Yeah,
people having like these very strong emotional reactions to other people's opinions and just to the climate in general. So inevitably, you know, we come full circle, right? Because it's going to be affecting people's well-being and mental health, right? So here we are with that.
yeah. It feels like it's something new every week, right? Like it feels like you have a situation where there's an assassination attempt, and I don't get in on as far as like the conspiracies and whether it's a prop or it's fake or it's not or whatever the case is. All I do know is that somebody lost their life, and I know that two other people were wounded. And however things came about, it's a situation where again that's an unfortunate situation, right? Like that impacts somebody's family, somebody's loved one, somebody's grieving now. And a week after that, you have a situation where the acting president, who's was supposed to be running for the next, for an additional term, is stepping down due to whatever reasons. And this is really unheard of. Like I haven't been alive for, a super long time, but I'm pretty sure nothing like this has taken place. And with all of these events that continue to take place, like week after week, and then you had like the debates a month or two ago, um, it's like it activates like a huge feeling of uncertainty. And with that, I think it talks about, like you mentioned it, a lot of uneasiness and these rigid beliefs where people are starting to like engage in this dichotomous thinking where you have you're on this side, you're on that side, and like you mentioned, like these high polarizing views. And
Yeah.
that brings a lot of anxiety, like just high anxiety.
And then I think also, like, what we got to remember, right, is we got to consider the candidates that we have too, right? So
Mm-hmm.
as of right now, it's probably going to be Kamala Harris, or most likely, right, running against Donald Trump. And the thing is, one of the reasons why I think a lot of people are anxious is because I think a lot of people kind of remember the climate on two different kind of experiences. The climate when Trump was first running for president and during the presidency for some people, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
also the climate, kind of when Barack Obama was running for president, right? And you had a lot of like racial undertones, kind of, and we started having these religious conversations and a lot of xenophobia and all of these things, right? So I think you have people on both sides, right? But especially people of color, right? Especially people who are, of the Muslim faith, right? That are kind of looking at this situation and nervous, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then additionally, you have the issues that are on the table. So you might have, somebody who's not necessarily connected in the ways that I said, but in terms of their gender, they're a woman, right? And they're looking at it like, yo, if Donald Trump gets elected, it's going to impact my reproductive rights a certain way, right? So you have all of those different perspectives, mixed up, and it's going to cause anxiety for
Yeah,
people, right? Then on top of that, the election isn't for, I think it's about, a couple, almost 3 months, right?
yeah,
So we have all of that time, right, where people are talking to each other, right? And again, we're not kind of socialized at this point as a society where we can really entertain alternate thought. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a recipe for disaster in terms of social interactions on the ground and like well-being. So it, people are going to have to. We talk about coping skills all the time. We talk about boundaries all the time, but you got to be able to set boundaries with the social media, going down the rabbit holes, you know, um, you got to know that no matter what side, in terms of your political views, you know, certain places where you go for that information are going to be echo chambers of your views, right? So when you leave that, don't expect everybody else to have the same view, right? Um,
Exactly.
because if you don't have that expectation, then your reaction may not be as strong, but eh,
I
listen, a
gotta,
lot of
I got,
these things that a lot of these issues we talking about affect people deeply.
yeah, I have a couple polls here, right? So in late May, there was an election-related survey that indicated more than 40% of Americans reported signs of anxiety of depression. Um, a similar percentage, it says that the news of social media coverage of the election had them feeling even more anxious than usual. There was a separate Yahoo News poll of 1,800 Americans that was conducted also in late May that indicated about 60% said that they felt very or somewhat anxious about the presidential contest, right? So you have to think about it.
Okay,
This was taken
that's significant.
before, right? This was taken before the presidential debate, the first one that just took place. And I can only imagine what the numbers are now, given all of the events of just the past 2 weeks.
Right, right.
So stress like in events like we just witnessed, because one of the events we saw was right on TV, right? And they continued to play it over and over and over again. And then now you have, like you mentioned, you know, the racial undertone and all these other different things are going to be a part of it. Like we have to kind of expect it because we've seen this play out before, where
Right.
you have not only just the racial component, but now the gender component also. Right? We don't just have two white
Mm.
men that are running against each other. Now we have a white male versus, a female person, of color. So yeah, absolutely. All of these things are going to be in it. And these type of events could absolutely, when we're talking about like stress and anxiety, could impact your sleeping patterns, your eating patterns, you know, all the different things, just the way you go about and how you conduct yourself in like your daily activities. And I totally agree with you. I think one of the most important things to do is those boundaries. When you're going into like, and you highlighted it, just going to a restaurant, it's the topic of discussion. It's a topic of conversation. When you're at work, people are going to be talking about it. Like I can't. As soon as I walked in on Monday, after everything had taken place in regards to you know,
Or the
President Biden stepping down, uh,
yeah,
everybody's asking. Everybody's asking me, getting my opinion, and you're hearing all these other different things. You're hearing things about the other party. Oh, Dr. Kyle, hey, how do you feel about immunity and such and such? Oh, and they will point out like another coworker, like, oh, so and so likes this, the X, Y, and the third, and you really is putting those boundaries between yourself and then also putting boundaries with like other people. All right, I think that's something we really have to understand and make sure that we're incorporating those. And also, along with that, like we have to have that responsibility with ourselves. Like you can feel strongly about whatever party, about whatever candidate, which is fine, it's your right. At the same time, we have to make sure that we're not imposing our views, right? We have to make sure we're not imposing our beliefs and our perspectives on other people. And because someone may have a difference of opinion, or they don't, they've made it clear who they're voting for, and that's not the same person you are, you have to let that go, right? Like those boundaries, there's a lot of boundaries in so many different forms or fashions that I think we need to practice. Like if someone doesn't agree with you, or if someone's starting a conversation, you know, workplace is not always the best place to be talking about politics because you know
I,
how charged it can be.
right. Especially I would say now because see, this is the thing, right? And I'm not going to even get super specific, but certain things, certain phrases, certain parties, right? Certain slogans, right? Now, like there's symbolism to them, right?
Mm,
So they're attached to certain things, right? So regardless of that, the reason why it's so emotional is because number one, for certain people, some of those issues are going to impact them personally, especially if you're talking about like reproductive rights, if you're talking about like immigration, right? Even if you're talking about, well, mass incarceration, right? Like those are going to be issues that people are going to be passionate about because every single one of them that I named, somebody can probably reach out and touch somebody that's impacted by it, right? So it's almost like not even a not to come at you, but it's almost like we would because I would say the same thing as you, right? Set the boundary and don't react beyond a certain point. But it's kind of like we all speaking out of both sides of our mouth because those issues are so personal. You
mm,
know what I mean? That it's like if you're advocating for one side because of one particular issue, and somebody's telling you, well, you know what I'm saying, treating it like a negotiation deal. And they're like, well, if you get
yeah,
70%, then you should be happy, right? And that 70% don't include your issue, right? Or doesn't address it sufficiently, you're going to be very upset, right? So, and I'm just saying, all of this stuff is wrapped up in it, right? That's why 4 years later, you have people that'll vote out candidates because they're like, yo, you made a pledge and you didn't do it, right? And meanwhile, the
right, right.
candidates looking at it, them like, yo, but I did all this other stuff, right? But that's in my opinion, like, yo, people vote on, issues that are like, obviously salient to them, and usually it's like one or two. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? So again, politics is highly emotional, but in general, I do agree, like you got to set the boundaries, especially like socially in terms of those interactions, and then how much media you're consuming. So, you know,
I think
other than
the
that, we gotta
emotional
let the games begin.
the emotional part is important for the reason that we should also be coming from a place of at least practicing some acceptance, like because there's no way you're not going to, depending on what side you kind of fall on or what you're advocating for, um, that if you're not experiencing these range of emotions and these responses, you should at least accept and be aware that other people are going to expect that.
Right,
So
right,
you're going to see people that are just going to be very rigid in their beliefs and what their perspectives are, and they're going to be very emotional. They're going to be very outspoken, and you're going to maybe have some people that are going to be able to regulate that in a different way. So as opposed to saying, well, why are these people, why are they acting, why is it so important, why is it this, like you mentioned, it's going to impact people for a variety of different reasons. Practicing that acceptance of, hey, you're going to see this, right? Especially as closer and closer we get to the election after every debate, right? Like, it's going to be the topic of discussion, or it's going to be like on your algorithm, it's going to be on whatever news channel you're watching. So it's understanding that this comes along the territory, right? And
Yeah.
accepting these are going to be some of the different things that you're going to either experience yourself or you're going to see other people experiencing, as opposed to trying to kind of fight that resistance, kind of fight that and be. I think when you start practicing acceptance and knowing that and anticipating that these things are going to come along with the territory, you're in a better place, right? Like, you're not banging your head against the wall or fighting that frustration. Um, so the best thing, in addition to your boundaries and practicing that acceptance, is also um, to inform yourself, right? Educate yourself on whatever you think views are important to you, and then you go about and you handle your business and vote for whoever, the person that aligns with your values. And as opposed to kind of interjecting and projecting all over the different place for the different things, educate yourself, right? I mean, I think
Yo,
that's another thing, because there's so much misinformation. So hopefully you're able to get it from like a reputable source of whatever is important to you.
I I agree with that, and I'm gonna just leave it at this. I think that's important on another level too, educating yourself just so that you know, number one, how far your vote goes, right? And two, so that you have a reasonable expectation about whatever your issue is, right? Because,
Yeah,
again, like, politicians run on platforms, right? But they don't necessarily fulfill all of those promises they make on the platform. And that's pretty much that's a regular thing, right? And they're going to fulfill promises based off their constituency, based off their largest area of support, based off a lot of things, right? So you have to understand as you can manage your own expectations. That's all I was saying.
absolutely, absolutely. So we'll see, man. I'm hoping it doesn't get too much more animated than what we've seen the past couple of
Oh
weeks,
man,
because
you
like
bug
this,
you.
I
You
don't
can,
know, man. The
you
stepping
can
down
hope
and the
that
assassination thing.
all you want, bro. The trash truck is coming, yo. It's coming. It's coming. The
Yeah,
mud's
man.
coming.
It's been something. So we'll see how it plays out. But absolutely, we're encouraging everybody to continue to take care of your mental health as these events draw closer and closer. So Jay, interesting article um came through my algorithms a little while ago, and I have to admit, like, I'm going to be completely honest, I wasn't aware um of this situation, at least to the extent that I'm getting ready to report about it. So it says, according to the CDC, the construction industry has one of the highest suicide rates among professions, with an estimated 6,000 construction workers dying by suicide in the year 2022, which is an increase from 2021. So that compares to around 1,000 people who died from a construction work related injury, right? They said the suicide rate is 75% higher for men in the construction industry than it is in the general population, which is already higher for males as it compares to females. It mentioned, for every 100,000 male construction workers, 56 died by suicide in 2022. That compared to 32 suicide deaths per 100,000 men in the general population.
Okay.
Like, when I read this, oh my, yeah, I was blown away. I really was. I had it makes sense, and we'll get into why it makes sense a little later in this conversation. At the same time, for whatever reason, it never really dawned on me. Like, it just never kind of came across my radar. Because we've talked about so many other different populations that are high at risk, right? Like, in
Right.
addition, of course, we know men have a higher suicide rate. But when we break down the kind of different subgroups and sublevels, we always kind of tend to talk about other different at-risk populations. And yeah, I have to be honest. Like, I really never considered construction workers, or male construction workers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
I
blown away
didn't
about this.
either. I didn't
Very,
either.
very
I
troubling,
mean,
man.
and the situation, right? Like, because, they're talking about obviously seeing this increase in like suicides, right? When work is plentiful, right? And I would have thought
Hmm.
it would have been the opposite, right? Um, I would have thought that when like work dried up, you would have seen this population kind of spike because, it's more financial strain, right? But they're kind of talking about, like an increase in like the amount of projects, the amount of responsibility, hours, stuff like that. So I thought that was interesting too, right? Because they're talking about the more work, right?
Hmm.
Just because I've always thought of it like, I mean, I don't really know the industry in and out, but I've always thought of it like as seasonal kind of employment, right? So I figured like the more work, that the guys and and the women would be, they'd be their quality of life would be improved. Um, but when you start reading the article and they start talking to you about like, the weeks away from family and the weather and stuff like that, then, it makes a little bit more sense. Just losing sleep and all of that stuff. But obviously
Yeah,
that's not something you know unless you know.
yeah. I think it's one of those things that um, those of us that work in other professions, we just kind of take for granted, and we don't. I mean, if you're thinking about some of the ancillary things you're talking about, as they mentioned, it's just it's inherently a difficult job, right? If you're
Right.
thinking about one aspect that they said is that they're putting in 10-hour plus hours, right, on during the day. And if you think about it, like anytime you've ever gone someplace, especially like we both work in like medical centers, like to and from when we're going to work, you would see construction workers already there, right? Even if we're getting to work at like 7 o'clock, 7:30, they're
Right.
already at whatever location, right? They're working on whatever high rise, whatever building, and they're still there sometimes when we're leaving out. So when you kind of start to kind of incorporate that, and then you're thinking about just the physical aspect of it, like what these guys are doing, and what like I can't imagine, bro. Like I think I'm tough, but I'm not
Right.
that I'm not that level of tough of like some of the things um that they're doing manual, right? The manual labor aspect of it. Like when they're up in the air, they're on different floors, working with the, just different mechanics and power tools and lifting and things. So that if you think about it, if depending on how long somebody has been in the business or the industry, how taxing that is on your body, right? You mentioned the harsh weather conditions, and you again, if you reflect back on it, right? Like if you're going to or from the work, you see these guys, they're out here wintertime in the heat wave that we just had, like that. You know how ungodly it was past couple weeks.
Right.
And you're talking about these guys are out there working on roofs, they're working in high skyscrapers, and it ain't much shade up there, man. 15, 20, 30, 40 stories up. It ain't much shade, and you getting that hot sun on you. So we already know the implications of just being out there in the brazen heat. Um Facing the deadlines, right? You have to get this job done by a certain time, right? You're on deadline, so you got the additional stress and pressure of that. You said the spending months away from home, living in hotels, living in temporary housing, and then because the workplace injuries, like you got to be on guard. You got to make sure safety is a priority. And like this is a lot, right? Like just going through this is a
Right.
lot, right? If
And
you're putting on that, that's like I mean, like that's high pressure, high job demand work environment, man.
I
Like,
agree. And then like to add to it, right, you got similar to sports, you got the warrior mentality kind of thing
mm,
where, it's like obviously it's gonna be in that line of work, there's gonna be significant injuries when they do occur. Um, and then the mentality is kind of like not to talk about the stress, not to talk about, the things that kind of make you nervous about the job, those kind of things have probably historically been glossed over because obviously the construction worker, is seen like a tough guy, right? Or like a masculine type of job and persona, right? So you have that to kind of grapple with as well. So I just,
yeah, they,
definitely an interesting situation in terms of like shedding light on something like that because I don't really think that that's an industry that people look at when they think about like mental health, especially suicide.
Yeah, you mentioned like with the stigma or that culture of the macho ness is that they said in the industry, if you talk to someone or about weakness or whatever the case may be, or that you're struggling, then that could impact you getting hired.
Okay.
So they said that's what kind of exacerbates or that stigma is that, yeah, if you open up, then you're not going to get hired. So now you're suffering in silence. Now you have to work, like you have to keep all this to yourself and whatever. And I don't know what their benefits and if it's a union situation or how that looks, but listen, if you're more likely, right? If we put this in perspective, if you're more likely to be killed by your own hands than to get killed on a job site accident, like that's an issue, right? Like the numbers said that compared to only 1,000 like job related deaths or accident related deaths were in the industry compared to 6,000.
Right.
You see what I mean? Like, because
Yeah,
most
that's
of the time
crazy.
when you think about construction incidents, you think about, damn, somebody must have got hurt on the job. Somebody, but no, like the deaths are are due to self transition. Like
Yeah, that's crazy.
that's a yeah, like that's very troubling, very concerning. Um, and I think what you mentioned it at the beginning of our conversation is that there's like work is plentiful, right? They just said there was the construction industry at the beginning of the year needed an additional 500,000 workers on top of the normal pace of hiring because they have to
Damn.
meet the demand, right?
Right.
So you got to think about that, right? Like you hear 500,000, so that's what that tells me is that you're probably going to have more people jumping and kind of disregarding the risk because now it's in demand. There's like money in it, right? It's
They want the
lucrative.
money, man.
They want the money. So you're not even going to be thinking about like, oh, yeah, I'm going through this, but like the money. You know how many times, especially
I
as men, and
mean,
just kind of generally speaking,
come on, bro.
we're putting a priority as the money, bro, like
Yeah, I
above our
mean,
health.
but that I think that's just people.
Yeah,
Like a
but
lot of
like
people go into a profession because they see
that's true.
the potential to earn a high salary, and then the stress, the schedule, how it impacts your family life, all of
Right.
that quality of life, all that consideration comes later.
Yeah. So I think that's a barrier. Because even through the article they talk about, some of the measures that they're trying to put in place, but just because you have that much of an industry is wide open and so lucrative right now, you're gonna have people jumping in head first.
Right.
It's just that's gonna be, I think, as a barrier, as funny as it is to say, where individuals are gonna be like, nah, the money's available, the money's it, they're hiring here about so and so forth. And that could work to their disadvantage. So I'm hoping that along with other different industries, like say these different corporations, that they start to put some of these measures in place, um, and you start to kind of attack that culture of, yeah, if you speak up, then yeah, you're not going to get hired, right? You're not going to, such as you're going to lose work, all these other different things, because this is tough, man. This is a serious crisis they got on their hands right now,
Yeah,
and
man. I mean, at the bottom of the article, they were talking about one company. They said they were starting to do some things, to kind of, try to deal with some of these challenges. It was called the Intel Project, and they were saying like they was just trying to create what they described as like spaces at the facility for support, for people to attend substance misuse meetings, and you can kind of talk with like colleagues about those issues, right? So again, it sounds good. It might be one of these situations where it's like brochures on a on a bulletin board type of thing.
when you go in the
Um,
trailer.
right. But you have to, at the end of the day, it's useless unless you deal with the stigma, right? That's going along with it. And if there are penalties, either direct or indirect, for like acknowledging mental health, then you can forget about it. You know what I mean? Because people aren't going to
I,
have the trust.
I think the best resource that they'll have, and they touched on it. I think the gentleman that was kind of speaking from firsthand experience, who you had used to be working in construction, is that I think they said he was going around, I think to different sites or different companies, and he was
Right.
speaking about. I think that's going to be probably their most beneficial resource that is coming from someone that's in the field or that has lived that experience, right? Because they're
Right.
this way the audience and that population is going to be able to identify with that. Now that you have that, you have him coupled with a healthcare professional, someone like ourselves, who can kind of speak more to the treatment aspect of things and what things are available. I think that will speak, louder and be more helpful than just kind of like you mentioned. Oh, we have this program, we have this, that, and the third. And
Yeah,
I'm not
man.
talking about that program in a disparaging manner, but yeah, oh, we have this, please, go talk to this person, and we have this available. Here's a pamphlet. Here's a card. If you have, like you said, that gentleman, that person, or you have more individuals like that are speaking from firsthand experience, and then you couple that with a clinician that's also available or that's going along with that whole situation, I think that'll be more helpful. But listen, shout out to all the construction workers, individuals working in landscaping, all these other different those that industry. That's tough, man. Again, I can't speak to how difficult. I think it's something. I'm happy that this article came out and we can kind of start highlighting it more. But absolutely, those gentlemen and women out there, yeah, please take care of your mental health as you're going into you're providing for your family. Because that's tough. That's tough out there.
Yeah, man. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Of
Yeah. All right, Jay. Are you a Wu Tang and Ghostface Killer fan?
course.
All right. Yes. All right.
Of
Because
course. Look,
listen,
we
if
got
you were
some
if you were gonna
Supreme
say no, I
Clientele.
might have had. If you were gonna
That's one
say
of my
no, I was
favorite
gonna
albums
end this
ever.
call. I was gonna end this call if you would have said no. I was like, no, we have nothing else to talk about.
What's your favorite album? Supreme Clientele is my favorite Ghostface joint.
Oh, Daytona 500 was tough too, bro. Iron
Okay.
Maiden, Iron
All
Maiden
right.
was tough. Um, yeah. No, I'm gonna have to. Yeah, Daytona 500, Iron Maiden was. Yeah. I'm gonna go with that. Supreme Clientele
Uh,
has some slaps on it, but
Supreme Clientele is my joint. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But
not
everybody got their favorite. But
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
guy though.
Yeah. So in the recent interview, Ghostface Killer opened up about how he wrote some of his verses on Only Built for Cuban Linx, Raekwon's classic album. How he wrote some of his verses, and Ghostface was pretty much on that album. Like it was like Raekwon featuring Ghostface Killer, right?
Right,
Because
right.
so he was on the majority of that album. Um, and he said that he opened up about how he wrote some of his verses while he was experiencing a schizophrenic episode. So I got in quotes. So he said, as a matter of fact, it might have started when I was in Ohio. He said, one day I don't know, I just smoked some shit, some weed, whatever. Like I'm telling you, I'm standing up in the kitchen and just everything just got light to me. I dropped the water on the floor because I couldn't hold it, and I ain't passed out. But it was like I told my man's like, "Yo, I gotta lay down. I'm bugging out right now." And he said, "Yeah, I'm bugging out too." But I'm like, "Yo, you're not bugging out the way I am." He said, "So I lay down, and then the shit just started whispering." He said, "I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you," and it just started like in like two worlds started merging. He said, "I'm trying to fight it, but then the next morning I woke up and my vision was blurry, and he said it was like kind of staticky on the TV." He said it lasted like that for a minute and shit. He said everything was just off. He said, I don't know, shit made me depressed. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't figure it out. I had to go. He said shit was just telling me what to do, was telling me to jump off the train, jump off the car, all types of shit like that. Like I was really going through it. And he said, the only person I could tell was the RZA. We know who the RZA is. Because he was, able to talk to me about the brain and all those different things. He's like, but um he said, yeah, he was like, it was just putting me through it. And he was like, it was the only way he can bring himself back down. So Jay, through what he's experiencing, again, Ghostface isn't my client. But what I'm gonna say, in my professional opinion, this sounds more like a substance-induced psychotic episode or disorder, depending on how long his symptoms um lasted. This doesn't give me like the flair of schizophrenia or so just because of how he started off the conversation or how his recollection was that he smoked some shit or he smoked some weed and then he started having some of those other different symptoms
I
and
mean,
delusions. That's what it sounds
I
like. I
mean,
don't know.
as it's
That's what it sounds
definitely
like to me.
not definitely, but it's some type of psychotic episode. We know
Yeah,
that, it sounds like that. It sounds like a break with reality, and he's describing, like disordered kind of speech. He's describing, hearing voices, commands. He's describing kind of having challenges with memory, attention. So, you know, I mean, it doesn't, it's all mixed up in there. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So we definitely know there was some depression. We definitely know there was some, he was kind of hearing voices and some hallucinations. Like, so, I mean, we know what that is.
To my understanding, like he hasn't mentioned or spoken further about like having any more of these episodes or being diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Hmm.
And I know a lot of times schizophrenic unfortunately gets tossed around very loosely. It's kind of been romanticized to when anyone, and I'm not saying that he didn't experience what he experienced, right? Like I can't speak to that. It just seems like I don't think he spoke about like that he's still having issues or there were any more further experiences similar to that. That's why for me, and he said he started off and said, "Yeah, I smoked some weed," and then he started talking about different things. It kind of seems substance induced. But I don't know. Like there's definitely a very bizarre and I imagine scary experience that he described.
I mean,
Um
they've been very vocal about smoking woods. You know what I mean? And when you smoke them type of drugs, like hallucinations, psychosis is not uncommon, right? So
exactly.
that's why when you go to the emergency room, they got to distinguish whether you know took LSD or whether you're having an episode, right?
Yeah,
Or you're really hallucinating. So, but either way, we
yeah.
know that he was hearing voices and he was hallucinating from what he was saying. So
Yeah. I
that's
mean,
the
and listen, and that's something I've talked to my clients and then just other people. I've had people, with our position and in our line of work, when people find out what we do for a living, we get those random questions, which is good, right? I can't tell you how many kids or how many young people have talked to me or like when they find out that I'm a psychologist, they'll be like, "Oh, like have you ever like had people that have like smoked this or such and such, and what was the result and what did they ever come back?" And I tell them, the same thing I'm gonna say here is you got to be really careful about what you're smoking, what you're sniffing, what you injecting into your body for the reason that a lot of this stuff is synthetic, man. A lot of
Mhm.
this stuff it's a different ball game. It's not the same substances that it used to be even 5, 10 years ago. Like they are lacing these things with all kinds of stuff. I'm not gonna sit here and wag my finger and say, oh, don't smoke and don't do drugs. We're not, I'm being realistic. Like people are going to do what they want to do at the same time. You really need to know where you're getting your stuff from, right? What's in it if you have the ability to do so. If it's coming from a trusted source for the reason that this is what you don't want, right? Like if you're just trying to smoke some weed and then you experience this
Right.
is not what you signed up for.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, what people, I've seen some of them folks, and you just mentioned it, Jay. I've had folks come in inpatient, and we don't know for a number of days if this is like a psychotic break, right? This beginning of something that's going to be on a spectrum disorder. I mean, schizophrenia spectrum disorder, or this is because this person took some bad whatever, right? You
Mhm.
don't know. Like you have to, time has to kind of tell. And I've seen there have been a couple of situations where whatever a client took, they never returned back to their baseline, to their normal daily functioning, man. Like whatever they took, like really, really impaired and compromised their functioning and like their cognitive ability, man. So you really, really people out there have to be very, very careful about what you're smoking and what you're using because it's a different ball game. It really is. It's scary out here.
Yeah. I just think, listen, man, especially in regards to like, like Ghostface, like it's just kind of ironic that this would come out at this point because, you know, there's always been like conversations like around the music where you just be like, a lot of the stuff he be talking about is so abstract. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You just wondered what state of mind he was in. At the height of his game, you just wonder what state of mind he was in,
Yeah.
to kind of come up with that, right? But some of the stuff he came up with now, obviously, he's talented, he's creative, and he's just kind of like that type of thinker anyway because of the body of work, right?
Right.
Um, but and I have no reason to think he's doing drugs like on that level now. But it kind of is in line with when you look at
It,
your Supreme clientele and because again, like if you smoking wools, and I'm a if in terms of what that is. If you don't, then it ain't my job it's not my job to educate you. Then that's gonna put you in that, and then you're going to make music. You know what I mean? And I'm not assuming that he was even doing it. I don't know. This is all speculation, but um, it'll put you in that kind of spacey,
yeah.
area. So it's not necessarily that surprising to me. But I'm just, to be honest with you, I'm surprised that he was just so open about it and willing to kind of share that experience because that would be something that a lot of people will kind of be embarrassed or ashamed about. But he's been very open about other things in his life, like his struggles with like poverty and his brothers with
Right.
their
Yeah.
physical disabilities and stuff like that. So, um, he was probably just using it as another like kind of teaching moment or just window into his life. So,
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Yeah. Salute to him for his transparency. And listen, I'm gonna call it what it is. If he's experiencing this, and he wrote what he wrote on only built for Cuban Links, bruh. You see what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine, I can't imagine eating cereal and experiencing what he described. Let
Right.
alone let me go put some fire, I mean, or wax.
Yeah.
I can't.
It's
Like you see what I'm saying? Like you
yeah,
hearing voice,
man.
you
It's
hearing all these different things. Yeah, like that's exceptional. Like that's a feat that I would never be able to perform. I can't eat cereal doing something like this.
and
You
he's
see what I
and he's
mean?
he's working like that.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
listen,
interesting.
bro, very very interesting. So again, make sure what you're putting into your body out there. Very very important. Um, Dr. J, anything before we get out of here? Anything else?
Nothing much, man. Just again, hope everybody's having a good summer. We appreciate you riding with us, and until next time, man.
Absolutely. Everyone, please continue to take care of your mental health out there throughout through the summer season. Please be safe. All right. And it's again, you do what you need to do, incorporate your action plans, your self-care plans as we are making our way through the rest of the season, as we're going through this political atmosphere. Really, really important that you take breaks and you practice moderation, whether it's watching news coverage, whether it's drinking, smoking, whatever your vice is, whatever you do for self-care, just make sure you're doing it responsibly. Jay, until we talk again, good brother.
All right, bro.
My guy.
Enjoy. Later.
All right.